Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Hijrah Holistics. Today let's discuss the prepper prophets. So, in this apocalyptic era, we've got many Muslims around the world desiring to make Hijrah to a Muslim land so that they can preserve and protect their iman and cultivate their deen and take good care of their families, their loved ones. So may we be successful in such efforts. When we look at the prophetic tradition, Quranically, in terms of the Sunnah, in terms of the broader prophetic tradition, we need to look for examples of how to go about preparing for the times that we're in. One thing that we have as an example to look to besides the traditional Sunnah is to look at the stories of the prophets, peace be upon them. Which prophets taught us about prepping, about preparing for the future, and what did that entail? So right off the top, we automatically have Nabis Yusuf, alayhi salam, who was in ancient Misr, in ancient Egypt. Prophet Yusuf is Joseph of the Bible. And in the ancient materials and in the Quran, he prepares food to take care of large numbers of people for a long time. Now, what was that food that he was preparing? They were grains and seeds. And what kind of grains and seeds would they have been in a historical context? Heirloom organic seeds. So Nabis Yusuf alayhi salam was preparing and saving he was saving many years worth of organic heirloom seeds, not only to take care of himself and his people, but for the lands and as many people as possible. Now, the biblical story is a bit different. There are some things, and that's where we apply Quranic correctives. For instance, in one of the translations, it says that when people came for assistance from all around the world, that Joseph, he first took their money and he took their lands and their resources, and then he took their labor and enslaved them. And it says that he enslaved the world. Now, this is very problematic in a number of respects, and that's not what all the translations say. And off the top, I'm not positive about which translation. It might be American Standard Version, it might be the NIV, and it might be a version of the King James. So if you happen to know, please let us know in the comments. So he preserved these heirloom organic seeds for large numbers of people that may have been the nations of the world around Egypt that came to Egypt when times got very difficult with drought and the associated difficulties that come with not having access to foods and water. So they came to him for assistance. Another prepper prophet that comes to mind is Nabi Nuh alayhi salam, Prophet Noah. So Noah, he not only is building the ark to bring all the creatures on board when the flood comes, but he's also storing away food and fresh water stores. So, and he does this, and these stores have to last for a considerable amount of time. And he's not just storing for him and his family to eat and for all the creatures to feed on during the time of the flooding and also when the flood recedes, because there's going to be a considerable amount of time where food is not growing. So that means that they have to have organic heirloom seeds to grow. They didn't have genetically modified seeds. They didn't have synthetic lab concocted materials to grow foods from. It was real actual food. So we've got two prophets there. Now, when I think about the biblical prophets, there are certain prophets that we have mention of in the Quran, but we have very little information about in the Quranic materials. One of those prophets is Nabi Ezekiel, alayhi salam, peace be upon him. Now, Ezekiel, some of the scholars believe that the reference to Dhul Kifl is referring to him. Now, Ezekiel, he could be considered a prepper prophet to some extent. There is an instance where where Allah has him set aside a certain type of food, and he was going to eat a certain specific diet that nowadays is preserved in, I believe it's called Ezekiel 4:9 bread. Forgive me if I'm off with that. Please correct me. It's been a long time since I've seen this product. And it has like old, how can I put it? Like ancestral grains. I don't know if kamut is in there, but there are a number of very old, non-modified, heirloom, organic seed lines, and also lentils, and a number of materials. So it's high protein, it's got fiber, it's a nutrient-dense food. So he's living off of this. So perhaps by extension, we could consider him one of the prepper prophets. Now, are there any other prepper prophets that you can think of that Allah had them set food aside or prepare for a difficult time, for an apocalyptic period of time? We know that another prepper prophet is going to be Nabi Muhammad, peace be upon him. Okay, so we've got these prophets that would be considered prepper prophets, and that taught a variety of ways to set foods aside and to prepare things to protect one's family and one's community, one's nutritional health, etc. So that's at least 4. Another prepper prophet that we could consider would be Nabi Isa alayhi salam. Now this is Jesus, this is Nabi Yeshua. Now Isa, I wouldn't consider him as much of a prepper prophet in the sense of him saying to set foods and stores aside. However, in the biblical materials that are quite apocalyptic, I believe in the book of Matthew, he speaks about the importance of paying attention to the signs of the times. And when the time of trial and tribulation arises, he says to go to the hills and the mountains, which is very similar to Nabi Muhammad, peace be upon him, where he says, when the times are difficult, basically to go into the mountains and that have rain, and the valleys with rain, and to bring your animals and your creatures there. Now, Isa, one of the things that he says that's interesting is he says that when it happens, don't even bother bringing anything. Go, get away. And then he says that it's going to be a very difficult time for women who are pregnant or who have children with them. So that's just logical when you think about difficult times. Now, humanity, we've always had difficult times. We've always had apocalyptic events that felt like the end of the world. And I've said this a number of times in videos. If you saw the Mongols coming on the horizon, or an invading force, or the Assyrians, or some mighty military force in the past, it was going to be an end of the world event. And for many people, it literally was the end of the world, because their lives ended. And oftentimes their lives ended in very traumatic events. So that's an end of the world event where it's like, boom, it all happens, and then you're arriving at the day of judgment in the blink of an eye. So I just wanted to quickly bring up a number of prepper prophets and think about examples that we have of how to set foods aside, and tools and materials to protect ourselves, clothing, whatever we might need. This is a time where it's very important for us to prep. If you cannot make Hijrah immediately to a safe location, and then that leads to another question. Where is a safe location? People always think about making Hijrah to a Muslim land. Where was the first Hijrah? The first Hijrah was to Ethiopia. It was to a Christian land. And we could argue about whether the king later, the Negus, actually becomes a Muslim or not. We could discuss that, but that's different, because when Nabi Muhammad, peace be upon him, sends the Muslimin on Hijrah to migrate to Ethiopia to protect their iman, to protect their deen, to protect their lives, they go there, and it's a Christian land. And they're respected and they're protected. So there could be instances where there is safety. And also, when the Muslimin make Hijrah to Medina, obviously the Prophet is going to become the leader, but there's a diverse group of people there, including Jews and pagans, etc. It's not just Muslimin, it's a diverse community. And so it's important to think about what is Hijrah. And so I've argued in other videos it's important to make a holistic Hijrah, to set our intention and our efforts. And what are we making Hijrah to? And what are we making Hijrah from? I would argue that we're making Hijrah now. The holistic Hijrah is to make Hijrah from the transhumanizing, synthetic, realm of tyranny and oppression, and to one of organic, garden-like living. To get to an organic, ethical, pure way of living as much as possible, and to make Hijrah to the prophetic lifestyle as much as possible, to the prophetic reality, to come into the prophetic reality, to the presence of prophetic living and energy field. So this is something to think about. I know this might sound a little far out to you, but it's something to consider. And I would ask you to not just reject it out of hand. Take the benefit, leave the harm, and pray about it. If there's something you doubt about what I'm saying, go and do some research, consider it carefully, and pray about it. Make istikharah if you need to, because we are in very, very serious times. And there is much benefit in studying the lives of all of the prophets, because we do not discriminate amongst the prophets. Peace be upon each and every one of them. Peace to all of the warners, all of those who stood on justice and protected the poor, the widows, the innocent, the orphans, the vulnerable. We're people of justice, and we must protect one another as we move forward. And the organic, Adamic, genetic line is absolutely essential to protect. So until next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.